Thank you very much. Here to talk about our opposition day motion. We know that Canadians are really hurting when it comes to cost of groceries. Every time people go in, they see the prices go up. And on top of that, we're seeing some really devastating results of how the impact of high cost of groceries are hurting people. We know 1 in 4 Canadians are skipping meals. We know there's record food bank usage. And all the while, Justin Trudeau has ignored the problem and not stopped rich corporations from ripping off Canadians. While Canadians are having a hard time buying their food, the CEOs of these rich corporate grocery stores are making more money than ever before, making record profits. So, and we've also looked at Justin Trudeau's approach. Just to remind folks, he actually proposed that people need to do a better job of shopping, to look at grocery flyers. He then said he was going to ask the CEOs of these large corporate grocery stores nicely to stabilize prices. Not only is that insulting, it's frustrating because the government, Justin Trudeau, has so much power to actually make life more affordable and refuses to do so, and insults Canadians with these solutions which are meaningless and have not worked and are not bringing down the cost of groceries in a meaningful way. And so we're proposing our plan. Our plan is this. We're going to force corporate grocery stores to lower their prices, or else we will impose price caps. This is about using the power we have to actually make life more affordable. So if corporate grocery stores want to keep on ripping off Canadians, we're sending them a message. Lower your prices or else. In addition, our plan is to reform and overhaul Nutrition North, which Laurie Idlout, our Member of Parliament for Nunavut, will talk about more detail. But we know this program should be working to help give people in the North access to nutritional and affordable food, but that is not what's happening. And so Laurie will talk about that. Angella MacEwen is here as well, an economist with CUPE. We'll talk about what this means in terms of putting in a price cap, or putting in a price cap on food. Again, our message is clear. To Justin Trudeau, enough's enough. Stop letting these corporations rip off Canadians. To the CEOs of these large corporate grocery stores, you've got to lower your prices or else. And I got to also point out that Pierre Poilievre would never take on these CEOs. Those are his buddies. Those are his friends. He's never going to bring down the price of groceries. For Canadians that know they're getting ripped off by these corporate grocery stores, Pierre Poilievre is never going to take them on. He's never going to bring down those prices, and that's going to cost you. You Democrats are committed to fighting for you. I'm going to do that in French, and I'm going to invite Laurie and then Angela. Donc, c'est clair que les gens en arrachent. C'est clair que le coût d'épicerie continue d'augmenter et c'est tellement difficile pour les gens. Ça fait 3 ans que les prix des épiceries augmentent et Justin Trudeau a laissé ces grandes entreprises d'épicerie de continuer d'exploiter les gens. Donc, on a un message aujourd'hui. Je sais que les gens sont frustrés avec Justin Trudeau. Et il a laissé ces grandes entreprises de les exploiter et ses solutions étaient insultantes. Et il a dit que vous devez faire un meilleur job quand vous faites les épiceries. Il a dit que vous devez regarder les dépliants. Il a dit qu'il va demander gentiment au PDG de stabiliser les prix. Ces solutions n'ont pas fonctionné. Ce sont des solutions insultantes. Donc, on a un message clair aujourd'hui pour le gouvernement et pour les PDG. Réduire les prix des essentiels, sinon on va plafonner les prix. Aussi, on va parler d'un programme qui aurait dû aider les gens dans le Nord, mais qui ne fonctionne pas. Donc, on doit le réformer, le changer, l'améliorer. Et aussi, on a donc Laurie Idlout, députée de Nunavut, va parler de cet enjeu. Et aussi, on a un économiste, Angella MacEwen, qui va parler de cette approche. With that, I want to pass the mic to Laurie Idlout, MP for Nunavut, who will talk about why it's so important for us to overhaul Nutrition North.
Koyan me Jagmeet Singh me udlakot o kakakto matuinak po nga taman na akikigligaro tao yagero garwan ni katyavang not pimmareo yok asitjira kang ningan ni kikaktok taka amaro ukyok taktong mutate aktong nakangin naksang mata takwa akikigligak padliangin mata Kisiani tako si mayugut, takwa niuvervikut, sorlo, kinaw jaksakti, naminik, $3.91 million magerong mit, takwa ukyok taktong mutate, aksurong naktukok tidlugit, taman na ukawsarikan na rakamaritavot. Thank you. Good morning. It is my we are here to answer why it's so important to reform Nutrition North, because at this point, tax dollars are being used to support corporate greed. Tax dollars are being used that are supposed to alleviate poverty in northern communities. Instead, those tax dollars are being used to support the salaries of corporate CEOs. For example, the CEO of the Northwest Company had a salary of $3.91 million. Meanwhile, a cashier in Iqaluit, for example, only earns $21 an hour. These are drastic changes that need to happen because not only is it impacting salaries in my communities, but it is not alleviating poverty in Nunavut and Arctic communities. If this subsidy were really working, we would see food insecurity being addressed. Unfortunately, it is not, and that's why we have called for the reform of Nutrition North. Since I've been elected in 2021, I've called on the Minister of Northern Affairs to reform Nutrition North, but his answer always is, we have more work to do. We have more work to do. We have more work to do. Never ever offering any solutions. His most recent solution, after I asked him to make sure to audit the program by the Auditor General, his response was to push back on my solution instead to offer an internal review and maybe possibly later an external review. This is what the Liberals do. They delay rather than act on solutions that are being offered to them. The Conservatives are no better. The Conservatives did, what they did was change the food mail program that supported directly consumers to help with the shipping costs of nutritious foods. When the Conservatives were in government, they changed it to the Nutrition North program, where those tax dollars instead went to corporate greed, to corporations like the Northwest Company. And that is why we're calling for the overhaul of the Nutrition North program. Thank
you so much, Lori. Now, Angella MacEwen, economist with CUPE.
Thank you very much. So right now we're in a situation of overlapping supply shocks. Economist Isabella Weber, about 2 years ago now, put out a paper explaining and showing with the empirical data how when we're in a situation with overlapping supply shocks, competition policy and monetary policy aren't enough to address increasing prices. And that it's really important to address increasing prices in key sectors, what she calls systemically significant sectors. And those are core basic necessities, housing, food, energy, those types of things. And so when we look at the data since that paper has come out, it's been proven that that's actually what's happening. There's a supply shock in the sector, and all of the actors in that sector feel comfortable raising their prices without any fear of losing the market share, which is what normally happens during if you have appropriate competition. Everyone's afraid of losing market share if they increase prices, so prices remain stable. That doesn't hold in a situation where we have these overlapping supply shocks. That's why we need an intervention like this. So the types of things that work are automatic price caps, where you say, keep it like this, and then you can only increase it by so much every year. We already have that in several provinces in the form of rent control for renting. It's really important. We have it in other policies as well. We regulate the price of gasoline, for example. So this isn't new. This is something that we do. Other policies that can help address or prevent those price increases or that profit taking is an excess profits tax. And certainly it's very helpful to have that to discourage that profit taking from happening in the first place. What happens when those prices increase in those sectors is it trickles throughout the economy and it increases prices throughout the whole economy. So you want to stop it in its tracks before it's able to spread throughout the whole economy. And I think that this measure is very thoughtful in terms of giving a certain amount of time for actors to decide it's in their best interest to keep prices low for essential goods. And if not, that there will be, a stick that we can use in order to prevent those price increases for families who can't afford to feed themselves. So other countries have done this. We do it in other sectors. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's responding to, the empirical data that we have in terms of what is actually happening in the economy right now. Thank you.
So much, Angela. Thank you very much, Angela. And with that, we're ready for any questions you might have.
So, Mr. Singh, my grocery store has hundreds of products, lettuce, and so on. Would you set a frozen price on everything in the store? Is that what you're talking about?
We're talking about essentials. So it's a basket of goods, and there's lots of different ways to establish what essential foods are. We can look at some of the ideas, just what would intuitively make sense. Things like infant formula is an essential. It's something that families need to feed their kids. There are different ways for us to look at that, and we can get into details, looking at Statistics Canada, looking at the nutrition guidelines. But we're talking about an essential basket of goods that should be affordable for Canadians. And we want to force grocery stores to do that, or else we will impose a price cap.
Would it be frozen prices, though? That's what I was asking. 0% growth in terms of the price?
Right. So for the essential items, we want it to be a cap, lowering the prices and maintaining those to give people relief right now.
We're in a free market, though, and when you think about price caps and things like that, it sort of brings to mind places like Venezuela or Cuba. And I'm wondering, would there not be some kind of impact on the market by imposing these kind of controls?
Well, we know that these exist. Ms. MacEwen talked about there's existing examples in Canada where we do have a limit on prices when it comes to rent. France has recently actually done exactly this, and they negotiated and they imposed a limit on prices for a number of goods, a number of products across a number of grocery retailers, and they've actually successfully brought down food prices. What we're saying is the situation is pretty extreme in Canada. We've got record food bank usage, 1 in 4 Canadians skipping meals. Things are getting extreme. And Justin Trudeau has ignored this problem, has let these rich corporations rip off Canadians and make record profits. And more evidence is mounting that these companies are ripping off Canadians, and they're going to continue to do that because these are essentials. People need to go and buy their groceries. So Justin Trudeau's allowed this to happen. It's gotten to an extreme point. We need bold action to make life more affordable. That's why we're saying lower the price of food, or else we'll impose a price cap.
Do you actually have a legal mechanism for doing so? I mean, obviously there isn't legislation in place that applies price caps to groceries. Would you have to pass a bill?
Yes, there's lots of different ways to do this. I mean, the benefit of being a laggard on this is that other countries have already imposed price caps, specifically with relation to groceries and in other areas as well. So we can look at other jurisdictions for how they've done it. But let's be clear. Justin Trudeau's approach to this has been very insulting. He told Canadians to do a better job of shopping. He said, look at grocery flyers. Then he said he was going to ask the CEOs nicely to stabilize prices. He even then floated the idea that everything is on the table. He might impose tax measures if grocery prices don't come down. He's done none of that. Grocery prices have not come down. We've seen that over a number of years, over 2 years, food prices have been up 20%, over 20%. So Canadians are feeling that squeeze. Things are hurting. And we need action now. And so that's what we're calling for. And we also know that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives will never bring down the price of your groceries because they're too cozy with the CEOs of these corporations. They're never going to make them lower their prices. We are. Our plan is very clear. Lower the price of essentials or we will impose a price cap.
Mr. Singh, can we shift gears a little bit? What do you think should be done about winning participants in foreign interference amongst parliamentarians?
We saw the reports and are very troubled, particularly by the report that indicates that there are some MPs that knowingly supported or facilitated foreign interference from other governments. That is very damning, very disappointing, and frankly very serious. And so I believe if there's any evidence that someone knowingly worked with a foreign government to influence our democracy, they should no longer be a member of parliament.
Croyez-vous que les noms des parlementaires en question devraient être révélés?
Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter votre question?
Croyez-vous que les noms des parlementaires en question devraient être révélés?
S'il y a des preuves qui montrent clairement qu'il y a un député qui a travaillé ensemble avec un autre pays pour ingérer dans notre démocratie, oui, on doit savoir si c'est clair qu'il a fait ça, quelqu'un a fait ça, et puis ce député ne doit pas continuer si on sait qu'il ingère et aide un autre pays à créer cette ingérence.
So you think that any MP who's been working with a foreign government, they should be named? Could you explain why?
Well, if there is clear evidence that a member of parliament knowingly assisted a foreign government to interfere with their democracy, I think it's very clearly something that should not be allowed. There's no way a member of parliament should be able to continue to work in this place if they are assisting another government in interfering with our democracy. That's just wrong.
This report said pretty clearly, though, that the problem was that some of these cases might have been criminal, but couldn't be prosecuted because of what they called the long-standing problem of translating intelligence and protecting it in courts. So is that something you feel needs to be addressed? In other words, so that intelligence can be protected and not revealed, the sources of it cannot be revealed in a court?
Well, there has to be a way that once there's intelligence, it's similar to in criminal cases when there is a suspicion of something, when there's reasonable cause. That's not the same thing as evidence, and then you obtain evidence. And so if there's intelligence that there is this type of interference going on, then there should be due process, that evidence tested, and if it's found to be beyond a reasonable doubt something has happened, then absolutely that person should no longer continue as a member of parliament.
It sounds like you're saying there should be further investigation rather than protecting the intelligence in court. You're a defense lawyer, you know what we're talking about.
Yes,
here.
yes. So I think that, the way it should work is you've got intelligence or you've got reasonable grounds that don't meet the level of evidence. What should happen is that intelligence is tested through obtaining evidence, and that evidence can be tested in court. That's the process that should happen. You can protect, it's often done in criminal courts as well. You've got confidential informants. Their information is protected, their identities are protected, but then we can't rely on that without having evidence that corroborates it, and that evidence should be challenged in court.
Why do you think that intelligence has to rise to the level of evidence for Parliament to take action? I mean, even in the criminal court system, the allegations, once someone is charged, they're still innocent until proven guilty, but there are ramifications, there are bail conditions. So why can Parliament not act now without definitive evidence, which may not happen because supposedly people who participate in foreign interference are very smart at concealing things?
Well, there still has to be due process, but I want to highlight that it is very serious if there are knowing examples where people knowingly assisted a government to interfere with our democracy. That is very serious, and they should be taken seriously. And we need to see follow-up steps. There are ways to do that. There are ways to take in intelligence and then investigate and have evidence that can be tested. But ultimately, we need to protect our democracy. If this intelligence is true, this is deeply concerning, very serious, and we need to see next steps taken.
J'ai un autre sujet. J'aimerais vous parler du rapport de la vérificatrice générale. Je veux savoir si vous avez été surpris qu'elle conclue que 70% des contrats accordés à McKinsey n'ont été de façon non concurrentielle et que très fréquemment, les ministères et organismes ne suivent même pas leur propre politique.
Le rapport de la vérificatrice générale montre encore un autre exemple de gouvernement libéral de Justin Trudeau qui veut aider ses amis, c'est ce qu'il semble, et ignorer les règles. Ça, c'est vraiment problématique. C'est inquiétant. On ne doit pas avoir cette situation. En plus, ce que je veux voir, au lieu de dépenser des centaines de millions de dollars pour les entreprises, des consultants privés, ce qu'on doit faire, c'est on doit utiliser notre service public. On doit investir davantage pour avoir un service public qui peut faire tous ces travaux. Donc, c'est un autre exemple qu'on doit changer cette approche. C'est une approche qui fait mal à notre pays et qui fait mal quand on parle des dépenses, et on doit changer ça.
That's a question for my French colleagues.
Yeah.
À votre opinion, qu'est-ce que le gouvernement doit faire en réponse de le rapport de NSI CUPE?
Oui, donc le rapport soulève des grandes inquiétudes. S'il y a un député qui par exprès, a aider un autre pays à ingérer dans notre système de démocratie, c'est complètement inacceptable. Donc, la prochaine étape, on doit faire une enquête, on doit avoir la preuve, on doit avoir une poursuite dans la Cour de justice. Et puis, si quelqu'un est coupable, il ne peut pas continuer comme député.
Does the continued presence of these witting parliamentarians within this building, within politics, impact, perhaps taint other parliamentarians under a cloak of suspicion? And I'm speaking about, there is a race factor involved. Are other individuals, MPs who may be of Indian or Chinese descent, who are obviously not under interference, but remain under suspicion just because these individuals are not named?
I think overall it erodes trust in our institutions at a time when we already know that there are serious challenges to confidence in our institutions. And the fact that there are some members of parliament that the report indicates knowingly or wittingly were involved in interfering with our democracy and supporting a foreign government is very problematic for the reasons that you outlined. It undermines trust in the institution. It could cast aspersions unfairly on innocent members of parliament. And so that's why a follow-up on this is very vital. That's why we called for a public inquiry in the first place. We knew that this is something that required the independence of a public inquiry to give it the seriousness that it was due, and to get the recommendations for what we can do to safeguard and protect our democracy moving forward.
Completely different topic. The Grassy Narrows First Nation is taking Ottawa and the province to court over the contamination. What's your thoughts on that?
I remember visiting Grassy Narrows. It is so heartbreaking that an Indigenous community surrounded by lakes and rivers has that water has been contaminated by a company, and no one has cleaned it up. And in addition to not cleaning up the water, they also demanded a treatment center, and there's been massive delays with moving forward with that. It's an ongoing example of Indigenous communities receiving second-class treatment, being ignored, and fundamentally being mistreated. And this is wrong, and it has to end. We need Indigenous communities need to have access to clean drinking water. If there's any evidence or any examples of contamination of water, that water needs to be cleaned up. And any of the impacts of that, the members of the community that are impacted by that contamination. In this case, there's members of the community that I've met that have long-lasting chronic conditions as a result of contamination. They need to be compensated and supported, and there needs to be a treatment center available. This is something we've got to take seriously. This is Canada's fault, and Canada must step up.
Last question.
I was going to give Raisa one, but all right, thanks so much. Merci.